They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but in high society it's best served with a side of champagne. When Lily walked into the Pierre Hotel that night, wearing a dress 5 years out of style, her ex-husband Gavin thought he had the perfect target. He laughed, he mocked, and he tried to destroy the little dignity she had left in front of New York's elite. He thought he had won. He didn't know that the man standing in the shadows, the billionaire owner of the very building they were standing in, was holding a ring in his pocket. And he wasn't just there to watch. He was there to claim his queen. This is the story of how arrogance met its match. The invitation felt heavy in Lily Jenkins's hand, the cardstock thick enough to be a weapon. It was cream-colored with gold-embossed lettering, the 15th Annual Garrison Charity Gala. 3 years ago, Lily would have been organizing this event. She would have been the one approving the floral arrangements from Renard's, checking the seating chart to ensure the mayor wasn't placed next to his rival from the sanitation department, and smoothing the lapels of her husband's bespoke Brioni suit. Now she was standing in a cramped, drafty studio apartment in Queens, staring at the invitation that had arrived by mistake. Or perhaps it wasn't a mistake. Perhaps it was a final twist of the knife. The addressee was Mr. and Mrs. Gavin Sterling. The mailman had delivered it to her address because her name was still technically on some of the old forwarding lists from their shared assets, a clerical error that Gavin's high-priced lawyers at Cromwell and Sullivan had missed. "I shouldn't go," Lily whispered to the empty room. Her reflection in the cracked hallway mirror looked tired. At 29, she had faint lines around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, working double shifts at a mid-tier graphic design firm, a far cry from the architectural career she had sacrificed to build Gavin's real estate empire. She tossed the invitation onto her small kitchenette table, landing it next to a stack of unpaid medical bills for her mother's dialysis. Gavin Sterling. The name tasted like ash. He was the golden boy of New York real estate now. The man who had taken her portfolio, her designs for the Skyline Renewal Project, put his name on them, and then divorced her for irreconcilable differences the week the venture capital funding hit his account. He had left her with nothing but a settlement that barely covered her mother's first round of treatment and a non-disclosure agreement that bound her to silence. She turned on the small television in the corner. As if summoned by her misery, the local news was running a segment on the Gala. And expected to attend tonight is the elusive tech mogul and industrialist Alexander Kincaid. Kincaid, whose recent acquisition of the Port Authority logistics chain has made him the wealthiest man in the tri-state area, though rarely makes public appearances. Lily froze. Alexander Kincaid. 2 weeks ago, Lily had been freelancing trying to pitch a sustainable housing design anonymously to a holding company. She had met a representative, a sharp, quiet man, who asked probing questions about the structural integrity of her sketches. They had met for coffee 3 times to discuss the prints. She knew him simply as Alex, a senior consultant. Could it be the same man, number Alex, wore sweaters that had seen better days and drank black coffee from a bodega cup? Alexander Kincaid was worth $40 billion. But then the news anchor shifted to a photo of Gavin. He was smiling, his arm draped around a woman who looked like a porcelain doll, Tiffany Blanchett, the 22-year-old daughter of a steel magnate. Mr. Sterling is expected to announce the expansion of Sterling Heights tonight, a project that critics say will redefine luxury living. Sterling Heights. That was her design. Those were her blueprints. He was going to announce the expansion tonight on the very work he stole from her. A cold, hard resolve settled in Lily's stomach. It wasn't anger. It was something far more dangerous. It was the realization that she had nothing left to lose. She walked to her closet. Pushed to the back, wrapped in plastic, was a dress she had bought 4 years ago but never worn. It was a vintage emerald green silk gown, cut on the bias, elegant and timeless. It didn't have the sequins or the feathers that were currently trending in the pages of Vogue, but it fit her like a second skin. She didn't have diamonds. She didn't have a stylist. She pulled her dark hair back into a severe, elegant chignon and applied the last of her good red lipstick. She wasn't going there to beg. She was going there to witness the theft of her life's work, and perhaps, just perhaps, find an opportunity to look Gavin Sterling in the eye and let him know she was still standing. She took the invitation. She didn't need a frantic taxi ride. She took the subway to 59th Street and walked the rest of the way to the Pierre Hotel, the cold November wind biting through her coat. As she approached the grand entrance, the paparazzi were already in a frenzy. Flashbulbs popped like lightning storms. Limousines were disgorging men in tuxedos and women dripping in Harry Winston gems. Lily handed her coat to the checkroom attendant, revealing the emerald dress. She took a deep breath, clutching her small, battered clutch. She showed the invitation to the security guard at the heavy oak doors. He scanned the QR code. It flashed red invalid. Lily's heart stopped. Of course, Gavin would have invalidated the list. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the guard said, his voice flat. "This invitation has been voided." People behind her began to murmur. "What's the hold-up? Some crasher, probably." Just as Lily turned to leave, burning with humiliation, a voice came from the shadows of the vestibule. "She's with me." Lily turned. Standing there adjusting his cufflinks was the man she knew as Alex. But he wasn't wearing a sweater. He was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo that fit him with military precision. He looked taller, broader, and infinitely more dangerous than the man she had discussed blueprints with over bodega coffee. The guard's eyes widened. "Mr. Kincaid, I didn't realize." "Miss Jenkins is my guest," Alexander said, his voice smooth as velvet, but hard as steel. He stepped forward and offered Lily his arm. His blue eyes locked onto hers, sparkling with a secret amusement. "You're late, Lily. We have work to do." Lily was too stunned to speak. She took his arm, her mind reeling. The consultant was the billionaire. "Just follow my lead," he whispered, leaning close to her ear as the doors swung open. "And don't look at your ex-husband yet. Let him come to us." The grand ballroom of the Pierre was a kaleidoscope of gold leaf crystal chandeliers and the intoxicating scent of money. The air smelled of expensive perfume and truffles. A string quartet played a soft rendition of Vivaldi in the corner, barely audible over the hum of 1,000 high-stakes conversations. Lily felt the eyes on her immediately. It wasn't because she was famous. It was because she was on the arm of Alexander Kincaid. The room seemed to tilt toward him. "Keep your head up." Alexander murmured, his hand warm and reassuring over hers. "You built the concepts half these people are trying to invest in. You belong here more than they do." "I thought you were a consultant," Lily hissed under her breath, keeping a smile plastered on her face as they navigated the crowd. "I am," he replied with a smirk. "I consult myself on how to spend my money. I wanted to see your talent without the filter of my reputation, Lily. Your designs for the social housing project were brilliant. But tonight isn't about business. It's about correcting a balance." Before she could ask what he meant, the crowd parted near the center of the room. Gavin Sterling was holding court near the ice sculpture. He looked impeccable in a black velvet tuxedo, a glass of Bollinger champagne in one hand, his other hand resting possessively on the waist of Tiffany Blanchet. Tiffany was wearing a silver dress that looked like it cost more than Lily's childhood home. Gavin was laughing at something a senator said, throwing his head back in that practiced, charming way that had once made Lily fall in love with him. Then his gaze drifted and stopped. The color drained from Gavin's face so fast it looked like he'd seen a ghost. He blinked, staring at Lily. Confusion morphed into recognition, and recognition morphed into a sneer of pure malice. He didn't see Alexander, who had momentarily stepped aside to grab 2 flutes of champagne from a passing waiter. Gavin only saw his ex-wife standing alone in a room full of sharks, wearing a dress he remembered seeing in the back of her closet years ago. He excused himself from the senator and whispered something to Tiffany. They both looked at Lily Tiffany, giggling with a cruel hand over her mouth. Gavin walked over his stride, purposeful. The predators in the room sensed blood. The conversation in the immediate vicinity died down. "Lily," Gavin said, his voice loud enough to carry, "I didn't realize they were letting the service staff mingle with the guests this year." A few people chuckled nervously. Lily stiffened. "Hello, Gavin." "Tiffany." "No, really." Gavin continued, stepping into her personal space, using his height to intimidate her. "How did you get in? Did you sneak past the loading dock, or did you find an old invite in the trash?" "I was invited," Lily said, her voice shaking slightly despite her best efforts. "Invited?" Gavin laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Lily, look at you. You're wearing that rag from 5 years ago. You look desperate. Is this about the alimony?" "Did the check bounce? I told you my lawyers handle that." He was drawing a crowd now. This was his strategy attack. First discredit, publicly ensure no one would ever believe her if she spoke up about the designs. If she was the crazy, stalking ex-wife, she had no credibility. "I'm not here for your money, Gavin," Lily said, clenching her fists. "Then why are you here?" Gavin sneered, gesturing to the room with his champagne glass. "This is for the movers and shakers of New York, Lily, not failed graphic designers living in Queens. You're embarrassing yourself. Actually, you're embarrassing me. It's pathetic." Tiffany chimed in, her voice high and nasal. "Babe, is this her? The one who couldn't keep up?" She looked Lily up and down with exaggerated pity. "Oh, honey, you should really leave. You smell like public transportation." The humiliation burned Lily's cheeks. She could feel the tears pricking her eyes, the familiar feeling of smallness that Gavin had cultivated in her for years. He was winning. He was making her the spectacle. "Security," Gavin called out, snapping his fingers at a passing guard. "We have an intruder. This woman is harassing my fiancée and me. Please escort her out." The guard looked hesitant, but Gavin Sterling was a major donor. He stepped toward Lily. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "She's not going anywhere." The voice didn't shout, but it cut through the noise of the ballroom like a knife through silk. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. So what? Alexander Kincaid emerged from the crowd. He didn't rush. He walked with the slow, terrifying confidence of a predator who knows he has no natural enemies. He walked right past the security guard, who immediately backed down and stood next to Lily. He handed Lily a glass of champagne, his demeanor calm, before turning his icy blue gaze onto Gavin. Gavin's arrogance faltered. He looked at Alexander, then at Lily, then back at Alexander. Mr. Kincaid, I didn't know you were. I was just handling a disturbance. This woman. Alexander interrupted, his voice low but audible to everyone in the silent circle that had formed around them. is the only reason I decided to attend this vanity project of yours, Sterling. Gavin swallowed hard. I don't understand. You know her. Alexander smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Know her, I'm here to represent her interests. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving Gavin's sweating face. And frankly, Sterling, looking at the cheap suit you're wearing and the even cheaper manners you're displaying, I'm beginning to wonder if you're the one who crashed this party. The room gasped. In the world of high finance, Alexander Kincaid calling someone cheap was a death sentence. Gavin stammered, his face turning red. I'm the keynote speaker. My company, Sterling Holdings. Your company. Alexander raised an eyebrow. He reached into his tuxedo jacket pocket. Funny you should mention your company. I was just reviewing some interesting architectural filings regarding the Sterling Heights project. Alexander turned to Lily, offering her his arm again, publicly validating her status. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. You tried to throw my fiancée out of the party, Gavin. I believe you owe her an apology. The silence was deafening. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. Fiancée. Gavin whispered, the glass trembling in his hand. Tiffany dropped her clutch. Lily looked up at Alexander, shock written all over her face. He squeezed her hand tight, a signal. Play along. Yes. Alexander said, his voice ringing out to the hundreds of guests watching. My fiancée, and the future lead architect of the Kincaid Global Group. Now, about that apology. The silence in the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and pressed against the skin like a physical weight. 300 of New York's financial elite tech moguls and socialites were holding their breath, their eyes darting between the three figures standing near the ice sculpture. Gavin Sterling, usually the master of the boardroom, looked as though the floor had turned to quicksand. The crimson flush that had started at his collar was now creeping up his neck, staining his jawline. He opened his mouth, but the easy charm that had won him investors and seduced Lily years ago had evaporated. Gavin started, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat, desperate to regain control. He looked around the room, hoping for an ally, a friendly face, someone to laugh and break the tension. But the crowd was a fickle beast. They smelled weakness. They were looking at Alexander Kincaid, a man whose net worth could swallow Gavin's entire company before breakfast, and they were making their choice. Alexander didn't move. He didn't blink. He stood with one hand in his pocket, the other holding his champagne flute, with a casual indifference that was more terrifying than a shouted threat. He waited. He was comfortable in the silence. He let it stretch second by agonizing second, forcing Gavin to exist in the spotlight of his own making. We're waiting, Gavin, Alexander said softly. The volume was low, but the timbre of his voice vibrated through the air. Lily was gracious enough to attend your event. You were ungracious enough to insult her. Correct the record. Tiffany Blanche, standing beside Gavin, looked like a deer caught in high beams. She tugged on Gavin's sleeve, her whisper loud enough to be heard by the inner circle. Gavin? What is he talking about? Why is everyone staring at us? Gavin shook her hand off, his knuckles white. He looked at Lily. For the first time in years, Lily didn't look down. She didn't shrink. Fueled by the warmth of Alexander's hand on her arm, and the sheer absurdity of the moment she met Gavin's gaze. She saw the fear in his eyes, not fear of her, but fear of losing his status, fear of the man standing next to her. Lily. Gavin said the word, tasting like bile in his mouth, He tried to smile, but it looked like a rictus of pain. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was simply surprised to see you. Tensions are high with the launch tonight. If I was abrupt, I apologize. Abrupt? Alexander repeated, tasting the word like a bad wine. He shook his head slowly. You called her presence pathetic. You said she smelled like public transportation. You tried to have security remove her like a vagrant. That isn't abrupt, Sterling. That is cruelty born of insecurity. Alexander took a step closer, invading Gavin's personal space. Try again, and this time address her as the future Mrs. Kincaid. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Kincaid. The title carried weight. It meant Lily wasn't just an ex-wife. She was protected. She was royalty. Gavin's Adam's apple bobbed. He looked at the investors watching him, the partners from Goldman Sachs, the real estate developers from Dubai. If he didn't fix this, they would smell blood. They would pull their funding. He turned fully to Lily, his posture collapsing slightly. Lily, he said, his voice quiet, stripped of its arrogance. I apologize. I was out of line. You look lovely tonight, and I wish you and Mr. Kincaid the best. It was a surrender, a total public capitulation. Lily felt a strange sensation in her chest. It wasn't joy. It was relief. The monster who had haunted her nightmares, who had told her she was worthless, who had stolen her genius and called it his own. He was just a man. A small, sweating man in a velvet suit. Thank you, Gavin, Lily said, her voice steady. I accept your apology. Alexander nodded, accepting the victory with a slight inclination of his head. Good. Now, if you'll excuse us, my fiancée and I have better company to keep. He turned Lily away, presenting their backs to Gavin. It was the ultimate dismissal. As they walked away, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Waiters materialized with fresh drinks. People who had sneered at Lily's dress 5 minutes ago were now nodding respectfully, their eyes wide with calculation. Alexander guided her toward the French doors that led to the terrace. He didn't stop to chat. He moved her through the crush of bodies, his grip on her arm firm and protective until the cool night air hit their faces and the noise of the party faded behind the glass. Only when they were alone, standing on the stone balcony overlooking Central Park, did Alexander release her. Lily walked to the stone railing, gripping it to steady her trembling hands. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her light-headed. She looked out at the city lights, the very skyline she had once dreamed of shaping. Fiancé, she whispered, turning to look at him. Alexander was leaning against the wall, watching her. The hard, jagged edge he had shown Gavin was gone, replaced by the calm, analytical expression she recognized from their coffee shop meetings. He took a sip of his champagne. I had to improvise, he said calmly. It was the only title that gave me the immediate authority to protect you. If I had introduced you as a business partner, he would have laughed. If I introduced you as a friend, he would have started rumors. But a fiancé that makes you untouchable. You lied to 300 of the most powerful people in New York. Lily said, her eyes widening. Alexander, the press is inside. By morning, this will be on the front page of the Post. My mother watches the news. How am I supposed to explain this? Let them talk, Alexander said, pushing off the wall and walking toward her. In fact, I'm counting on it. He stopped beside her, looking out at the park. Lily, why did you come here tonight? I told you, she said, defensiveness creeping back in. I wanted to see him. I wanted to see him announce the project. No, Alexander corrected gently. You came because you know he stole it. You came because you wanted to see if he had the audacity to build your skyline renewal concept under the name Sterling Heights. Lily froze. The wind whipped a stray lock of hair across her face. How do you know that? Alexander reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo and pulled out a slim, folded document. He handed it to her. Lily unfolded it in the dim light. It was a photocopy of a blueprint. Her blueprint. The one she had drawn at her kitchen table 3 years ago. The one Gavin claimed he had lost during the move. But in the corner, stamped over her initials, was the logo of Sterling Holdings. I did my due diligence, Lily, Alexander said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. When you pitched me your sustainable housing designs 2 weeks ago, I recognized the style, the curvature of the load-bearing walls, the use of passive solar heating in the atrium. It was unique, a fingerprint. He turned to face her. I've been tracking Sterling's project for months. I'm looking to acquire the land adjacent to his build. When I reviewed his filings with the Department of Buildings, I saw the same fingerprint. But the name on the plans was Gavin Sterling. Lily stared at the paper tears, pricking her eyes again. He told me my designs were amateur. He said they weren't viable. Then he filed them under his name. He's a thief, Alexander said simply, and a mediocre one at that. He doesn't understand the engineering behind your work. That's why the project is over budget and delayed. He's trying to build a Ferrari engine with instructions he can't read. He placed a hand over hers on the railing. His skin was warm against the cold stone. I didn't step in there just to save a damsel in distress, Lily. I don't do charity. I stepped in because you are the true architect of $1 billion asset, and I don't like seeing talent wasted. Lily looked up at him, searching his face. So what is this, a job interview? It's a war council, Alexander said, a dark smile playing on his lips. Gavin is going to announce that project in an hour. He's going to take credit for your life's work, unless we stop him. Stop him. How I signed an NDA. I have no money for lawyers. You saw me. I'm wearing a 5-year-old dress. The dress is vintage, Alexander noted, and it's stunning. But you're right. You can't fight him alone. That's why you're going to be my fiancée. For real. Or as real as the world needs to believe. Lily pulled back slightly. You want to fake an engagement to get back at a business rival. I want to destroy him, Alexander said, his eyes hardening into blue ice. And I want to build the Skyline project the way it was meant to be built, with you as the lead. But to do that, I need leverage. As my fiancé, you gain my legal team, my media access, and my protection. We sue him for intellectual property theft, and we use the publicity of our engagement to spotlight the truth. We make him toxic. He held out his hand. He tried to shame you, Lily. I'm offering you the chance to bury him. What do you say? Lily stared at Alexander's hand. It was a broad hand, capable and steady, the hand of a man who built empires. The proposition was insane. It was the plot of a bad romance novel. Fake an engagement to a billionaire to destroy her ex-husband. It was ridiculous. But then she thought of the kitchenette in Queens. She thought of the medical bills. She thought of Gavin's laugh as he mocked her dress. She thought of the blueprints her babies being warped and twisted by a man who didn't understand the soul of architecture. She took Alexander's hand. I have conditions, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Alexander didn't pull away. He gripped her hand, sealing the pact. Name them. My mother's medical bills. They get paid. Tonight. Done, Alexander said instantly. My assistant has already cleared the debt. I assumed you would say yes. Lily blinked. You were that confident? I'm a good judge of character. You're a fighter, Lily. You just forgot how to swing. What else? If we do this, I'm not just a prop, she said, stepping closer, her eyes flashing. I'm the architect. When we get the project back, my name goes on the building, not yours, not Mrs. Kincaid, Lily Jenkins. Alexander's smile deepened, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. It was a look of genuine respect. I wouldn't have it any other way. Now fix your lipstick, my love. We have a dinner to attend. Walking back into the ballroom felt different this time. Before, Lily had felt like an intruder. Now she felt like a spy carrying a bomb. The atmosphere had shifted. The air was thick with whispers. As Alexander led her toward the VIP table, one situated directly in front of the stage, heads turned. The glances weren't mocking anymore. They were dissecting. Women were looking at her ring finger bare for now, and men were analyzing her posture. Alexander pulled out her chair. It was the seat of honor usually reserved for the highest-ranking politician or donor. He sat beside her, draping his arm casually over the back of her chair, creating a physical barrier between her and the rest of the room. "Drink your water," he murmured, as the waiters swarmed them, pouring a 1996 Dom Perignon. "You'll need a clear head." Across the room at table 2, Gavin Sterling was unraveling. He was seated next to the mayor, but his eyes were fixed on Lily. He was downing his third scotch. Tiffany was scrolling frantically on her phone, likely reading the social media storm that was already brewing. #Kincaid Mystery. Fiancée was probably trending on Twitter. A waiter placed a plate of truffle risotto in front of Lily. She picked up her fork, but her hand shook. "Look at him," Alexander whispered, leaning in as if to whisper a romantic nothing. "He's terrified. He knows that I know. He just doesn't know how much I know." "He keeps looking at his phone," Lily noted, forcing herself to eat a bite. "He's checking his stock price. It hasn't dropped yet, but it will when the markets open tomorrow and I announce a review of the Sterling Heights structural integrity." Alexander took a sip of wine. "But tonight, we let him sweat." Suddenly, a shadow fell over their table. It was a woman in a sharp grey suit. Lily recognized her immediately. Victoria Vance, the editor-in-chief of the Manhattan Ledger, the most vicious gossip columnist and business insider in the city. "Mr. Kincaid." Victoria purred, her eyes darting to Lily like a hawk spotting a field mouse. "And the mystery woman. I must say, Alex, you've been holding out on us. I didn't even know you were dating, let alone engaged." Alexander didn't stand a subtle power move. He smiled lazily. "Victoria, always a pleasure. We prefer to keep our private lives private. But when you know, you know." He squeezed Lily's shoulder. Victoria's eyes narrowed, analyzing the chemistry. "Indeed. And you are—" She turned the full beam of her attention to Lily. "Lily," Alexander answered for her smooth as silk. "Lily Jenkins. She's an architect, a brilliant one." "Jenkins?" Victoria paused, her mental Rolodex spinning. "Related to the Jenkins who— Weren't you married to Gavin Sterling?" The table went quiet. The people nearby leaned in. This was the kill shot. If Lily faltered, the story became a scandal. If she held the line, it became a legend. Lily looked Victoria in the eye. "I was," she said, her voice clear. "A long time ago. Before I realized that I needed a partner who understood the difference between building a house and building a home. Victoria's eyebrows shot up. It was a perfect cryptic high society insult. And, Lily added, glancing at Alexander, Alexander has a vision that matches my own. Victoria smirked. She smelled the drama, and she loved it. Fascinating. Well, congratulations. I look forward to seeing the ring, darling. As Victoria walked away, scribbling in her notebook, Lily let out a breath she had been holding for a minute. Perfect, Alexander whispered. You're a natural. I'm going to throw up, Lily whispered back. Hold it in. The show is about to start. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The heavy velvet curtains parted, and the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the man of the hour, the visionary behind Sterling Heights, Mr. Gavin Sterling. Polite applause rippled through the room. It was thinner than usual. The incident at the door had spooked people. Gavin walked onto the stage. He had composed himself at least superficially. He adjusted the microphone, flashing his signature smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. Behind him, a massive screen flickered to life, displaying a 3D rendering of a gleaming glass tower. Lily gasped softly. It was her drawing. Not just similar, it was exact. He hadn't even changed the unique spiraling garden terraces she had spent months calculating. Thank you, Gavin said, his voice booming. Tonight is a celebration of innovation, of genius. He looked down at the front table. He looked right at Lily. Sterling Heights is more than a building. Gavin continued, his confidence returning, as he looked at the rendering. It is the culmination of my years of study, my sleepless nights, my vision for a greener New York. Alexander felt Lily tense beside him. Her fork clattered against the china. Easy, Alexander commanded softly. Let him dig the grave. He's using the original sketches, Lily hissed. Look at the lobby entrance. I designed that archway based on a sketch I made in Barcelona on our honeymoon. He hated it then. He called it structural suicide. And now he's selling it as his masterpiece, Alexander said, which means he doesn't know about the flaw. Lily looked at him confused. What flaw? Alexander turned his chair slightly to face her, ignoring the speech. I had my engineers run simulations on your original designs, the ones he stole. You designed that atrium for a specific type of reinforced glass, didn't you? A German composite. Yes, Lily said. The structural load requires it. Standard steel can't support the torsion of the spiral. Gavin cut costs. Alexander revealed, his eyes gleaming with predatory intelligence. My spies in his procurement department confirmed it last week. He ordered standard domestic steel and cheap tempered glass. He thinks it's just an aesthetic choice. He doesn't realize that without your specific materials, that atrium isn't a masterpiece. Alexander looked back at the stage where Gavin was pointing proudly to the very archway in question. It's a death trap, Alexander whispered. And when we reveal that his cost-cutting has compromised the safety of the entire building, he won't just lose the project, Lily. He'll go to prison for negligence. Lily stared at the man on stage, the man who had discarded her like trash. He was standing on a pedestal of lies, unaware that the foundation was already cracking. So when do we strike? Lily asked, her fear replaced by a cold, hard determination. Alexander checked his watch. The Q&A session starts in 5 minutes. I think it's time the fiancé asked a question. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. But first, Alexander said, opening the box to reveal a diamond that was shocking in its size and clarity. a flawless emerald-cut stone that caught the dim light and threw fire. Victoria Vance wanted to see a ring. I'd hate to disappoint the press. Lily stared at the ring. It was heavy, beautiful, and terrifying. "Put it on," Alexander said, "and then let's go take back your building." The diamond slid onto Lily's finger as if it had been sized for her the day she was born. It was heavy, a cold weight that felt less like jewelry and more like a weapon. The platinum band was cool against her skin, but the stone itself seemed to radiate a strange heat under the ballroom chandeliers. "It fits," Lily whispered, staring at her hand. It was the kind of ring that didn't just say, "I'm taken." It said, "I am owned by no one, but I am protected by a king." "I told you," Alexander said, snapping the velvet box shut and slipping it back into his pocket. His eyes were focused on the stage, but his body was angled toward her, a solid wall of midnight blue wool and expensive cologne. "Now breathe." He's opening the floor. On stage, Gavin Sterling was beaming. He had just finished his speech, a 15-minute monologue filled with buzzwords like synergy, paradigm shift, and legacy. He had wiped the sweat from his forehead and was now leaning casually against the podium, playing the part of the relaxed genius. "We have time for a few questions," Gavin announced, gesturing to the crowd. "Please don't be shy. The future of New York is an open book." A planted journalist from a friendly magazine raised her hand first. "Mr. Sterling, the aesthetic is breathtaking. What inspired the helix shape of the main tower?" Gavin chuckled, feigning modesty. "Well, you know, inspiration strikes in the quiet moments. I wanted something that represented the DNA of the city itself. Organic, upward moving." Lily's grip tightened on her water glass. "He's lying," she murmured. "The helix was to maximize wind deflection during hurricane season. It had nothing to do with DNA." "Patience," Alexander soothed. Another hand went up. "An investor from a pension fund." "Gavin, what's the projected timeline for the atrium completion? We've heard rumors of delays in material sourcing." Gavin waved a hand dismissively. "Rumors, always rumors. We are ahead of schedule. The glass is being installed next month." "Now," Alexander whispered. "Stand up." Lily's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every instinct in her body told her to stay seated, to stay invisible. This was the behavior Gavin had trained into her. Don't make a scene. Don't be difficult. Don't outshine me. But then she looked at the ring. She looked at Alexander's calm, expectant profile. And she remembered the late nights she had spent drawing those plans while Gavin was out networking with Tiffany. Lily pushed her chair back. The scrape of wood against the parquet floor was sharp. She stood. Because they were at table 1, her movement was immediately noticeable. The spotlight operator, sensing drama, swiveled the beam slightly, catching the emerald sparkle of her dress and the blinding flash of the diamond on her hand. Gavin froze. His smile faltered, twitching at the corners. "Ah, yes, we have a question from the front." He tried to sound welcoming, but his voice was tight. Lily didn't need a microphone. Her voice, trained in presentation halls before she was silenced by marriage, was clear and projected perfectly. "Mr. Sterling," she began, "you mentioned the atrium is being installed next month. Could you clarify the load-bearing specifications for the central node, specifically regarding the torsion stress on the spiral beams?" The room went quiet. This wasn't a fluff question about inspiration. This was technical. Gavin blinked. He laughed nervously. "Well, that's getting into the weeds, isn't it? I can assure you our engineers have calculated everything to the highest safety standards. I'm sure they have, Lily said, her voice polite but relentless. But the original design called for a cantilevered truss system to support the 40-degree twist. If you're using standard steel, as the current filings suggest, the torsion stress would exceed the material's yield strength by 15%. So are you using the cantilever system, or are you risking a structural collapse? A gasp rippled through the room. The investors at the nearby tables exchanged alarmed glances. Collapse. Gavin's face turned a sickly shade of grey. He gripped the podium. Clearly you're misinformed. We are using high-grade materials. The best. Which materials? Lily pressed. She took a step closer to the stage. Because if you switched to domestic tempered glass to cut costs, the thermal expansion coefficient is different. In a New York winter, that glass won't just crack, Gavin. It will shatter. The entire atrium will rain glass on the lobby. That is preposterous, Gavin snapped, losing his cool. Who are you to question my specs? You're a graphic designer. Lily, stick to Photoshop. The insult hung in the air, ugly and raw. Alexander stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. He simply buttoned his jacket and looked up at Gavin with the boredom of an executioner. Actually, Gavin, Alexander said, his voice carrying easily to the back of the room. She's not just a graphic designer. She's the architect whose name is on the original timestamps of the KD files I have in my possession. Pandemonium. Cameras flashed rapidly, a strobe light of chaos. Reporters were shouting questions. Mr. Sterling, is this true? Did you steal the designs? Is the building unsafe? Gavin looked like a rat trapped in a corner. This is a lie. This is corporate sabotage. Kincaid is trying to tank my stock price so he can buy me out. I don't need to tank your stock to buy you out, Gavin, Alexander said, checking his watch. I already own your debt. The bridge loan you took from Liberty Capital to finance the construction, they sold the note to me this morning. Alexander offered his arm to Lily. And as the new primary creditor of this project, I'm ordering an immediate halt to construction pending a safety review by my lead architect. He looked at Lily. She was trembling not with fear, but with the adrenaline of finally letting the truth out. Shall we? Alexander asked. Lily looked at Gavin one last time. He was shouting into a dead microphone, his face purple with rage as his investors walked out of the room. Yes, Lily said. Let's go. The walk from the ballroom to the private exit was a blur of noise and flashing lights, but inside the bubble of Alexander's protection, it felt strangely calm. His security team had materialized out of nowhere. Two large men in black suits who cleared a path through the throng of reporters. They pushed through the heavy double doors into the service corridor, the muffled roar of the Gala fading behind them. The hallway was lined with stacked chairs and catering carts, the unglamorous underbelly of the hotel. Lily leaned against the wall, her knees suddenly feeling like water. She let out a long, shaky breath. Oh my God! Alexander stopped and turned to her. The fierce, corporate shark demeanor vanished, replaced by genuine concern. He stepped close, blocking the harsh, fluorescent light. You were incredible, he said softly. You didn't just rattle him, Lily. You dismantled him. I can't believe I said that, she stammered, looking at the ring again. Did you see his face? He looked like he was going to have a stroke. He might, Alexander said dryly. Men like Gavin don't handle humiliation well. Their ego is structural. Once it cracks, the whole thing comes down. Before Lily could respond, the door behind them burst open. Gavin Sterling stumbled into the hallway. He was alone, his bow tie undone, his hair wild. He looked nothing like the tycoon on the poster. He looked manic. "You!" he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Lily. "You bitch! You think you can do this to me after everything I did for you?" Alexander moved instantly, stepping between Lily and Gavin. His movement was fluid and lethal, his hands free of his pockets now. "Back off, Sterling. You're done." "I'm not done," Gavin roared, advancing despite the threat Alexander posed. "She's my wife. She's my creation. I pulled her out of that queen's gutter, I gave her a life, and this is how she repays me." He looked past Alexander's shoulder, his eyes locking onto Lily with a toxic mix of hatred and desperation. "Lily, tell him it's a lie. Tell him you're just jealous, because I left you for someone younger, someone better. You can't ruin me. I am Sterling Heights." Lily stepped out from behind Alexander. "No, Gavin," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. "You aren't Sterling Heights. You're a fraud. You didn't give me a life. You stole mine. You took my ideas, my confidence, my time. You told me I wasn't good enough to be an architect, so you could use me as a ghost writer." "You were nothing," Gavin spat. "You were a shy little girl who couldn't even order a pizza without stuttering. I made you." "You didn't make me," Lily said, touching the emerald silk of her dress. "You suppressed me, and tonight I didn't ruin you because I'm jealous. I stopped you because you were going to kill people with that building. Because unlike you, I actually care about the work." Gavin laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "Oh, save the morality speech. You're just sleeping with Kincaid for the money. You're a gold digger, Lily. Always were. You just traded a millionaire for a billionaire." Alexander's jaw tightened. He took a step forward, his fists clenching, but Lily put a hand on his chest to stop him. "Let him talk," she said, her eyes cold. "It's the only thing he has left." She looked Gavin up and down with pity. "I didn't ask Alexander for a dime, Gavin. I asked for the chance to build. Something you never gave me. And as for gold digging, I think we both know who married Tiffany Blanchett for her father's steel connections." Gavin blanched. The arrow had hit the mark. "The loan," Gavin whispered, his aggression suddenly draining away as the reality of his financial situation hit him. He looked at Alexander. You said you bought the note. That's bluffing. You can't just buy a commercial bridge loan on a Saturday night." "I can do whatever I want, Gavin," Alexander said coldly. "And I did. Liberty Capital was very happy to offload a high-risk asset. As of 9:00 p.m., I hold the lien on the land, the materials, and the intellectual property." Alexander reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper, not a blueprint this time, but a legal document. "This is a transfer of ownership," Alexander said. "You have two choices. Option A. You insist on fighting. I foreclose on the loan tomorrow morning. The project goes bankrupt. Your investors sue you for fraud. The press destroys you. You go to prison for the negligence we just uncovered." Gavin swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his nose. "And option B. Option B." Alexander continued, his voice void of emotion. "You sign the project over to Kincaid Global Group entirely. You step down as CEO of Sterling Holdings, citing health reasons. You disappear to a nice quiet island somewhere and never mention Lily's name again. If you do that," Lily added, "we won't press charges for the IP theft. You get to keep your freedom. But you lose the legacy." Gavin looked between them. The hallway was silent except for the distant hum of the hotel's HVAC system. He looked at the pen Alexander was holding out. It was the end of his world. He knew it. Gavin's voice broke. He looked at Lily, searching for some trace of the woman who used to fetch his coffee and soothe his ego. He found only a stranger in a green dress who looked like a queen. "Fine," Gavin croaked. He snatched the paper and the pen. He signed it against the wall, his signature shaky and jagged. He threw the paper at Alexander. "Take it. It's a cursed project anyway." He looked at Lily one last time, sneering. "He'll get bored of you too, you know. Men like us always do." Then he turned and walked away, back toward the service elevator, a defeated man in a velvet suit. Lily watched him go. She expected to feel triumphant. Instead, she just felt tired and clean, like she had finally washed off a layer of grime she had been wearing for years. "He's wrong," Alexander said quietly. Lily turned to him. "About what?" "About me getting bored." Alexander folded the document carefully and put it away. He looked at her, his blue eyes intense. "I've been looking for a partner who understands that structure is more important than decoration. I don't think I'll ever get bored of you, Lily." The air between them shifted. The adrenaline was gone, leaving something softer, more intimate. They were standing in a dingy hotel hallway, surrounded by dirty dishes and chairs, but the way he looked at her made the walls disappear. "So," Lily said, trying to keep her voice light, "I guess I have a building to redesign." "You do?" Alexander nodded. "But first I promised you dinner, and I believe we have a room full of people wondering where the happy couple went." "The happy couple?" Lily repeated. She looked at the ring again. "How long do we have to keep this up?" "The engagement." Alexander stepped closer, taking her hand. He ran his thumb over the diamond. "The project will take 2 years to complete. The press will be watching the whole time. It would look suspicious if we broke up next week." 2 years, Lily said. Her heart did a traitorous flip. "That's a long time to pretend." Alexander smiled a slow, genuine smile that made her knees weak again. "Then we better get very good at it." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "Ready to face the world, my love?" Lily took a deep breath. She squeezed his hand back. "Ready?" 2 years later, the skyline of New York City had changed. Where a dangerous, ego-driven glass tower was once supposed to stand, something far more organic and breathtaking now pierced the clouds. It was called the Verdant, a residential skyscraper that spiraled upward like a vine seeking the sun, covered in vertical gardens and stabilized by the revolutionary cantilever system that had become the talk of the architectural world. The lobby was filled with the same people who had been at the Pierre Hotel 2 years ago, but the atmosphere was different. There was no gossip, only awe. Lily stood in the center of the atrium, looking up at the German composite glass ceiling. It held the weight of the winter snow, beautifully casting a soft, diffuse light over the marble floor. "It's perfect," a voice rumbled beside her. Lily turned to see Alexander. He looked older, tired around the eyes. Perhaps managing a global empire took its toll, but his gaze on her was as intense as ever. "It's safe," Lily corrected him, smoothing the lapel of her white power suit. "That's what matters. We finished it, Alex, on time and under budget." "You finished it," Alexander said, taking her hand. "I just wrote the checks." Gavin Sterling was a distant memory. After the health reasons resignation news had leaked about the structural negligence, his reputation shattered. He had moved to Florida, managing a small chain of car washes. He had tried to sell his story to the tabloids, but no one cared about a disgraced tycoon when the hero of the story, Lily, was winning Pritzker Prize nominations. "The press is waiting outside," Alexander noted, checking his watch. "They want a statement from the lead architect." "They can wait," Lily said. She looked down at her hand. The emerald-cut diamond was still there. For 2 years they had played the part. They had attended galas, held hands for the paparazzi, and lived in the same penthouse. But behind closed doors, it had been a slow, terrifying, and beautiful burn. They had spent nights arguing over blueprints and mornings drinking coffee in silence. Somewhere between the foundation pouring and the spire installation, the line between the deal and reality had blurred into nothingness. "Alex," Lily said softly. "The contract. The 2 years are up. The building is done. The press won't care if we split up now. You're free." Alexander stiffened. The air in the lobby grew still. He turned fully toward her, blocking out the view of the magnificent tower she had built. "Free," he repeated, his voice low. "Is that what you think this has been? A prison?" "No," Lily stammered. "I mean, the arrangement. You did this to help me get revenge. You don't have to keep pretending." Alexander laughed, a short, incredulous sound. He reached into his pocket. For a second, Lily thought he was going to pull out a contract to tear up. Instead, he pulled out a simple gold band. "Lily," he said, his blue eyes softening. "I stopped pretending the moment you walked out of that service elevator and told Gavin off. I didn't stay for the building. I stayed for the architect." He took her left hand, sliding the gold band next to the massive engagement ring. "I don't want to renew the contract," Alexander whispered, leaning his forehead against hers. "I want to make it permanent. No more deals, no more shows for the press. Just us, building things." "What do you say?" Tears pricked Lily's eyes. Happy tears this time. She looked at the man who had given her the tools to rebuild her life, only to realize he had become the foundation. "I say," Lily whispered, kissing him, "that we have a lot more work to do." Outside, the cameras flashed, capturing the silhouette of the couple in the window of the city's newest masterpiece. But inside, Lily Jenkins wasn't performing for anyone. She was finally truly home. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Lily and Gavin. It's a reminder that true power isn't about how loud you can shout or how expensive your suit is. Gavin had the money, the fame, and the arrogance, but he lacked the one thing that actually builds a legacy substance. Lily spent years thinking she was small, because a small man told her so. But the moment she put on that green dress and walked into the lion's den, she realized that her worth wasn't defined by her ex-husband's opinion. It was defined by her talent, her integrity, and her courage to stand up when it mattered most. Revenge is sweet, but success is the only revenge that truly lasts. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If Lily's journey inspired you, or if you've ever had to pick yourself up after someone tried to tear you down, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where you had to prove everyone wrong? Let me know your story down below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Until next time, stay strong and keep building your own masterpiece.